Ever wonder why Hondas seem to just keep running forever, but Nissans get a bad rap the second someone mentions a transmission? Turns out there's a real reason, and it's not what most people think. Stick around because by the end of this, you'll know exactly what to check before either one costs you way more than an oil change. Let's start with the Honda because its whole engine philosophy comes down to one idea that's stuck around for decades. Honda's design approach has always leaned on keeping things simple where it counts and clever where it matters. The signature piece of that philosophy is VTEC, variable valve timing and lift electronic control. Picture two cam profiles built into the same engine. One is mild, tuned for everyday driving, low RPM, decent fuel economy. The other is aggressive, built for when the throttle actually gets used. At a certain RPM, oil pressure locks a pin and the engine physically switches from the mild profile over to the aggressive one. That's the VTEC kick people talk about. And here's why that detail actually matters for longevity, not just performance. Because the engine spends most of its life in that low-stress profile, the internals aren't getting hammered on every single drive. The K-Series engines, the K20 and K24 found in the Civic, Accord, and CR-V, are widely considered some of the most durable four-cylinders ever built. Simple valve train, naturally aspirated in most versions, and an overbuilt bottom end that's conservatively tuned well below its actual limits, which is a big part of why it holds up so well without falling apart early. A 2014 Civic with 240,000 miles on the original engine and transmission isn't some rare unicorn story. It's a fairly normal outcome for that platform, as long as oil changes happened on schedule. Honda's V6, the 3.5-liter J35 used in the Accord, Odyssey, and Pilot, tells a similar story. No turbo to babysit, no complicated forced induction parts that can fail early. Owners online consistently report these crossing 200,000 miles without major surprises. Just a straightforward engine doing exactly what it was built to do. Even the Pilot, which carries more weight and works harder hauling families around, tends to hold up just as well as the smaller four-cylinders, as long as the transmission fluid and spark plugs get attention on schedule. But that reputation only holds up as long as Honda sticks to that formula. And the moment they added a turbo to a smaller engine, things got noticeably more complicated. Here's the engine that changed the conversation. The 1.5-liter turbo, found in the CR-V, Civic, and Accord, became one of the most discussed Honda problems online for a reason that has nothing to do with bad luck. Owners started noticing a short, sharp rattle right at startup on cold mornings, lasted about 2 seconds, then disappeared like nothing happened. No check engine light, no smell, nothing visibly wrong. So most people brushed it off. That rattle is the sound of a part called the VTEC actuator losing its grip overnight, and it's tied directly to a much bigger issue underneath it: oil dilution. The 1.5-liter turbo is a direct injection engine, meaning fuel sprays straight into the cylinder instead of over the intake valves. In cold weather or on short trips, some of that fuel doesn't fully burn. It washes past the piston rings and mixes into the engine oil. Pair that with a smaller oil sump than most engines this size carry, and the oil gets diluted faster than most owners expect. Diluted oil doesn't lubricate the way it should. The VTEC actuator depends on stable oil pressure to hold its internal locking pin in place overnight. Once the oil's been thinned out by fuel, that pin has a little extra play, which is exactly what causes the cold start rattle. Ignore it long enough, and the timing chain itself starts to stretch, because it's been running on oil that was never doing its full job. The fix isn't complicated. Shorter oil change intervals, full synthetic, and actual highway drives that let the engine fully warm up and burn off any diluted fuel. Stay on top of that, and the issue mostly stays dormant. Skip it for a few years, and that 2-second rattle turns into a $600 to $1,000 repair bill for a new VTEC actuator and chain components. This is also part of why Honda has stayed cautious about offering small turbo engines in certain markets at all. On a Reddit thread about Honda's lineup in India, owners pointed out that these direct injection turbos get paired with a CVT instead of a traditional torque converter automatic. And that combination puts even more strain on a system already dealing with oil dilution. Honda would rather hold back than rush a powertrain combination that hasn't fully proven itself. even if that means a slightly less exciting lineup on paper. On top of the dilution issue, there's carbon buildup to think about too. Direct injection means fuel never rinses over the intake valves the way it does in older engines. Over time, that shows up as rough idle and a slight loss of power, usually somewhere past 60,000 miles. This isn't unique to Honda. Almost every direct injection engine on the market deals with it. But stacked on top of the dilution story, it's one more thing worth keeping an eye on. So Honda's naturally aspirated engines built a real legacy. The moment they added a turbo and leaned on a smaller, more stressed system, a brand new weak point showed up. Keep that theme in mind because it shows up again on the Nissan side, just in a completely different spot. Now flip over to Nissan, because the popular take online is that Nissan engines are simply unreliable. That's not quite the full picture. On Reddit, one owner described their Nissan Maxima with the VQ35 V6 sitting at 248,000 miles. The original owner did nothing exotic. Oil changes, basic upkeep, nothing else. The engine still ran like it had a third of those miles on it. If you've heard people write off Nissan engines completely, that story alone should make you pause for a second. That's because the VQ V6 isn't just a decent engine. It's arguably one of the most awarded engines in automotive history. Ward's 10 Best Engines list featured the VQ family for 14 straight years, from 1995 to 2008, a streak no other engine has come close to matching. It showed up in the Maxima, the Altima, the 350Z, the Infiniti G35, and a long list of other Nissans and Infinitis throughout the 2000s. What makes it so tough? A simple bottom end, a timing chain instead of a belt, which means no scheduled replacement every 90,000 miles, and conservative tuning that doesn't push the internals to their absolute limit. It's the same blueprint Toyota and Honda lean on for their best engines. Proven materials, nothing exotic, built to last rather than built to impress on a spec sheet. Even the older VQ40, the larger version used in trucks and SUVs like the Frontier and Pathfinder, carries that same reputation for shrugging off heavy use without complaint. So if the engine itself is this solid, why does Nissan still get dragged through the mud every time reliability comes up? The real answer isn't under the hood. It's bolted right next to it. Worth knowing before moving on, some later VQ engines, like the VQ37 VHR found in the Infiniti G37 era, use something called VVEL, which works differently than Honda's VTEC. Instead of switching between two fixed cam profiles like VTEC does, VVEL smoothly adjusts valve lift and timing continuously. The VQ40 in the Frontier doesn't have that system. It sticks with conventional cam phasing, which is honestly part of why it's held up so well. Less complexity under the valve cover means less to go wrong. Owners of the Frontier pickup in particular often report that older naturally aspirated VQ40 crossing 250,000 to 300,000 miles with nothing more than regular oil changes. One Nissan owner posted on Reddit that their Sentra's CVT completely failed at just 71,000 miles. Not worn out, not slipping a little, fully dead, needing a full replacement at mileage where most cars haven't even needed their first major service. That's not a one-off horror story. Altima, Sentra, and Rogue owners reported the same shuddering, the same hesitation, the same complete failures, often well before the 100,000 mile mark. What made this version of the CVT so much more failure-prone than the ones Honda and Toyota were quietly running in their own lineups during the same years? It comes down to how the transmission itself is built and how Nissan told people to treat it. Most Nissan CVTs from this era use a steel belt system from a supplier called Jatco. And on paper, that's actually the same basic concept Honda and Toyota use too. None of the big three run anything exotic here. The real gap shows up in the details around that belt, how much torque the unit is rated to handle, how aggressively the transmission is cooled, and what fluid spec it's designed around. Toyota's belt type units, for example, add a physical launch gear that takes the load off the belt during the most stressful part of driving, the initial takeoff from a stop. Nissan's early units skipped that kind of reinforcement, especially once a torquier engine sat behind it, like the 3.5-liter V6 in some Altimas and Maximas. And this is the part that made things worse. Nissan listed the CVT fluid as good for the life of the vehicle under normal driving, only recommending a change under what they called severe conditions. In reality, independent transmission shops recommend swapping that fluid every 30,000 to 60,000 miles, regardless of how the car is driven. Most owners never knew that, because the manual told them otherwise. The Altima and Sentra generated more CVT complaints than almost any other vehicle on the road during the 2013 to 2016 model years, and it led to a class action settlement covering those model years. Nissan has since updated the hardware on newer models, and the complaints have dropped. But the reputation stuck, and that's the gap that lets people lump a genuinely great engine like the VQ in with a transmission that gave the whole brand a black eye. One more detail that explains the spread of complaints. Nissan didn't use one single CVT across every model. The smaller Sentra ran a unit called the CVT7, which has a lower torque capacity, while the Altima and Rogue used the beefier CVT8. Same complaint: shuddering, hesitation, a loud whine on acceleration, showing up across completely different cars for slightly different mechanical reasons, but all traced back to that same torque capacity weakness under sustained heat and load. Before we go further, hit subscribe, because the next part covers a problem almost nobody checks until it's already too late. Another owner on a forum described bringing their Nissan Frontier in with the transmission shifting rough, almost jerky, even though the CVT debate doesn't even apply here. This one had a traditional automatic. The shop drained the fluid, expecting metal shavings. Instead, they got a pink, milky mixture that looked nothing like normal transmission fluid. If you've never seen that before, it looks almost identical to a melted strawberry milkshake. And once a mechanic sees that color, they already know what's coming. That milkshake color means engine coolant has leaked directly into the transmission fluid, and it's one of the most underrated failure points Nissan has ever had. Here's why it happens. A lot of Nissan trucks and SUVs use a radiator with the transmission cooler built directly into it, sharing the same housing as the engine coolant. Inside that radiator, a thin metal barrier separates coolant from transmission fluid. Over years of heat cycling, that barrier can crack. Once it does, coolant and transmission fluid mix together, and that mixture strips away the fluid's ability to protect the clutch packs and internal seals. The damage doesn't show up overnight. It builds slowly, contaminating the valve body and the torque converter bit by bit, until shifting goes from smooth to rough, and eventually to a transmission that won't engage at all. By the time most owners notice the milky fluid, the transmission internals are often already compromised. This issue mainly affected certain Frontier, Xterra, and Pathfinder models from the mid-2000s, and Nissan extended the warranty on the part as a result, from the standard 3-year coverage out to 8 years or 80,000 miles. The fix many shops recommend now is adding a separate, standalone transmission cooler and bypassing the radiator's built-in one entirely, so coolant and transmission fluid never share a housing again. And this wasn't an isolated complaint. Owners across multiple Nissan forums reported the exact same milky fluid, the same gradual shift quality decline, on trucks and SUVs that otherwise had no business needing a transmission rebuild this early. Once people started comparing notes, the pattern stopped. Looking like bad luck and started looking like a design flaw. So between the CVT story and this one, a pattern shows up. It's never really been about Nissan's engines failing on their own. It's almost always something connected to the engine, the transmission, the cooling system, quietly working against it. None of this is just internet opinion either. Industry data from RepairPal puts Honda's average annual repair cost at around $428 a year, the lowest of any major brand tracked. Toyota actually lands close behind at around $441. So the real outlier here is Nissan, sitting at roughly $500 a year, still below the industry average, but noticeably higher than either of the other two. That gap isn't from the engines. It's almost entirely explained by exactly the transmission and cooling issues just covered. So if it came down to choosing right now, Honda or Nissan, which one actually wins long term? The answer isn't as one-sided as people online make it sound. Honda built its reputation on keeping things simple where it counts. Naturally aspirated engines, predictable valve trains, and a transmission strategy that, until recently, leaned on conventional automatics in most of its larger vehicles. Nissan built one of the most celebrated V6 engines in history, then undercut its own reputation with a transmission rollout that happened too fast, with fluid guidance that didn't match reality. Where Honda runs into trouble is the same place a lot of modern engines do. Small displacement, turbocharged, direct injection setups that need more attention than the manual lets on. Where Nissan runs into trouble is almost always downstream of the engine itself. The CVT's torque capacity and cooling setup, or a radiator that was never built to keep two completely different fluids apart for the life of the vehicle. Buy either brand, and the engine is rarely the biggest worry. What actually decides whether that car is still on the road in 10 years comes down to changing fluids early, letting the engine warm up properly, and knowing which one of these failure points applies to the specific model sitting in the driveway. That's really the lesson buried in both brands' history. The badge on the hood matters less than people think. What matters is knowing the one part of that specific engine or transmission that needs attention before it becomes a five-figure problem. Park a well-kept Honda Civic next to a well-kept Nissan Frontier with the older V6, and it'd be tough to call one more reliable than the other at 150,000 miles. The difference only shows up when maintenance gets skipped, and even then, it shows up in different places for different reasons. One punishes neglect through the oil. The other punishes it through the fluid lines running next to the radiator. Same lesson, just delivered through a completely different part of the car. Two brands, two completely different ways of getting to 200,000 miles, or completely missing it. Before any shop quotes a transmission or timing chain repair on either of these, get a second opinion and ask specifically about the issues covered here. It can be the difference between a $200 fluid service and a $3,000 rebuild. So what are you driving right now? Honda? Nissan? Something else? Drop it in the comments and subscribe if you want breakdowns that actually explain why cars fail, not just which brands people argue about online. If this video helped you learn more about Honda from a different perspective, hit that subscribe button right now. See you in the next one, and thanks for watching.